When I was 7 or 8, one of my favorite books was My Father's Dragon. Have any of you ever read My Father's Dragon? It's an old book. A few of you, thank you, good. Not very many. It's a lovely book. It tells the tale of a young boy named Elmer who goes off on an adventure to an island called Wild. On Wild Island, Elmer meets an assortment of strange and troubled creatures, including a stuttering mouse, a weeping rhinoceros, a terribly itchy gorilla, and a miserably enslaved baby dragon. Elmer carries a full backpack with him, a backpack heavy laden for the journey with every necessity for surviving the trip and for meeting the unusual and often unfriendly creatures. With great precision, Elmer packs everything he needs to face anticipated challenges, including rubber bands, ribbons, and a stack of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like a good scout, he is prepared. And as the book unfolds, we see that each item in his backpack holds a special purpose. In the end, the boy has himself a high adventure, uses everything in the backpack, and saves the baby dragon. This little children's book speaks creatively of good planning and self-sufficiency. I am certain that this book was particularly appealing to me as a child because my family did a lot of traveling. As you may know, my father worked for Pan Am, and we flew all over the world for free. No more. We shared adventures in foreign lands, met unusual creatures. Sometimes those unusual creatures were us. Proper packing was essential, and the job entailed choosing items well with just the right number of slacks and shirts and so on. We had friendly family competitions to see who could pack most efficiently and effectively. And with all our careful planning, our careful packing, most often we would come back from a trip thinking we could have done with less. The story of My Father's Dragon became a kind of paradigm for my own life, packing lightly but well. I enjoy self-sufficiency. It feels good to have with me just what I need. I don't like having to ask others for help. Nobody does. I like being prepared. Not everybody likes being prepared. It is safe to say that in our best moments as a human race, we want our children to be prepared. It can be scary and humiliating for a child to show up in school without the things they need, without the notebooks and papers and pencils and pens and so on. That is why we as a congregation strongly support Set for Success. We want our kids to be prepared. We want them to have the confidence that comes with a backpack full of readiness. However, in this intriguing little story from Mark's Gospel, Jesus invites the disciples not to be prepared. He sends the disciples out 2 by 2, ordering them to pack almost nothing. They are to take no bread, no money, no bag for the journey. There are only 3 items the disciples are allowed to take with them. Do you remember what they are? Between you, you got them all. A pair of sandals, 1 tunic, and a walking stick. Now, what they are allowed to bring is as interesting as what they are ordered not to bring. The sandals are for protecting their feet, of course, and in a largely barefoot culture, sandals are an indication that Jesus expects the disciples to travel far and wide, to go the distance with his life-changing, healing message. The disciples are permitted to wear one tunic, which is highly unusual. Ordinary men's fashion in first century Palestine consisted of two tunics. You always wore two tunics, an inner one and an outer one, worn one over the other and fastened with a money belt. Here the disciples are allowed only one tunic. Why is that? Bible scholars point out that in order to enter a holy temple, to enter a place of worship, a man had to remove all of the outer garments. Only the inner tunic was permitted. In allowing his disciples only an inner tunic, Jesus seems to be suggesting that all of the places they will go are sacred places. All of the homes they entered are to be considered holy ground. The walking stick. It's another symbol of going the distance, and it's important because it identifies the disciples as men of goodwill. The walking stick lets people know they are travelers, not soldiers. They are not a threat. They come in peace. These are the things they are permitted: a walking stick, a tunic, and a pair of sandals. What are they ordered not to bring? It's interesting that as I'm listening, the one that showed up, you got them all, but the one that showed up most often was money. I think we're so used to carrying it around with us. They're ordered not to bring bread, bucks, and baggage. No food, no money, no luggage. Without food, cash, or other supplies, they must place their trust in God. They are forced to be utterly dependent on the grace of God and on the hospitality of the people they encounter. They are to learn that their lives rest completely in God's hands. That is perhaps the biggest message of the story. Your life is in God's hands. Trust those divine hands. If the disciples were to bring along backpacks full of rubber bands and ribbons, they might well miss the kindness of strangers. If their backpacks were filled with PB&Js, they might turn down that last-minute invitation to an unanticipated banquet with strangers. There are several useful life lessons in this one little story. It holds great advice for those who are seeking to follow Jesus. Certainly great advice for our confirmands as they begin this faith journey. Travel light. Don't carry a lot of baggage. Trust God. Be a person of peace. Understand that everywhere you go, every house you enter, may well be holy ground. But there is another shining final message in this story. That is, shake off the dust. Get rid of any dust from your feet when you leave a person or a situation. Jesus told the disciples, if people don't welcome you, if they don't want to hear you, shake the dust from your feet and move on. This means in your own life, if people will not welcome you, if they will not listen to you, and if they are uninterested in understanding you, don't take it personally. Move on. People are not always going to be open to you. They're not. The disciples were on a mission of healing. People are not always open to God's healing. The job Jesus gave the disciples was to change lives and hearts. If there's one thing I know, it's that people are not always open to having their lives changed or their hearts. In fact, sometimes people are downright hostile. Again, don't take it personally. There are days when you will run into strange and troubled creatures, a stuttering mouse or a weeping rhinoceros or an itchy gorilla or an enslaved dragon or just a grumpy neighbor. It's not about you. It's about them. Love them anyway and move on. Don't get stuck in the ugly things that may happen in this faith journey that is your life. Do what God is calling you to do and move on. When people reject you or misunderstand you, don't dwell on it. Sure, acceptance would be great, understanding would be ideal, but if it doesn't happen, shake the dust off your feet and move forward, because ultimately, moving on is an act of grace. May God bless you then on your journeys, that you may travel light, that you may be a person of peace, that you may meet others on holy ground, that you may have the courage to move on when necessary in the grace of Jesus Christ. Amen.